All right, everybody, welcome to the Salt Lake Business Podcast. I'm here with one of my mentors, Navin Thukkaram. Navin, why don't you let the people know who you are?
First of all, I was supposed to have a cheat sheet here, but I have nothing on my screen, but it's like a safety blanket, right?
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure everyone gets a lot of value. So I'm Navin Thukkaram, live up here in Park City, Utah, originally from Racine, Wisconsin, which is where I was born. Grew up right outside Chicago in a place called Northbrook, Illinois. If any of you know Northbrook, Illinois. Home of the Glenbrook North Spartans, went to public school. Growing up, played on the golf team, was captain of the golf team, and was just very focused on school, academics growing up.
Is that due to your parents?
Yeah, typical immigrant mentality. My parents are both from South India, Chennai, or the Madras area, if you know that area, Tamil Nadu.
It's on the, East Coast?
Yeah, south. It's like basically the southernmost part of India. And they came to America in basically the 70s and settled in Wisconsin, but really have been in Chicago now for like 40 years. So we're real Chicagoans.
Nice.
Midwestern values.
I'm from Cleveland, so.
There you go. You understand.
But I'm not big city like Chicago, so.
Well, this is, Northbrook is a small town. It was like 30, 40,000 growing up. It's part of the greater Chicagoland area, which, is like 10 million contiguous suburbs and, city.
Yeah.
So it's a big area.
Gotcha. So you graduated?
Graduated high school, went to Princeton for my undergrad, majored in engineering there, engineering and management systems, which is basically like applied math, operations research.
Useful math?
Very useful math, just all optimization of different stochastic models, mathematical models, things like that.
All right.
Which was actually, in retrospect, a perfect preparation to go to Wall Street. So after Princeton, I went to Wall Street and worked in investment banking at Deutsche Bank and then Lazard, which is both obviously large investment banks, and then went to private equity, which is a very typical track. The ideal track back then was you go to investment banking for a couple of years, M&A, mergers and acquisitions, which is sort of what a lot of folks wanted to be in, and then you went from there to private equity. Now they might go straight to a hedge fund or private equity, but back then that was the ideal track. And spent 2 more years in New York in the private equity world as a junior analyst, and then went to Harvard Business School for my MBA. So that was sort of the first.
Did they pay for your MBA, or how did that structure? Or you kind of just left?
Most people, I guess if you went to like a big consulting firm like McKinsey or like maybe like, who knows, GE or General Motors or one of those companies,
right,
they would pay for your MBA if you went back. But no, I was on my own.
Okay.
So I took 100% loans for everything.
Yeah.
For the 2 years, I think it was like 130 grand or 140 grand or something like that.
So you get the MBA from Harvard. You're feeling nice, right?
I'm feeling good, but I came out in 2003, which actually, so everyone remembers, 9/11 unfortunately happened on 9/11/2001. Market tanked. 2002 was a bad time, but 2003 for private equity was actually a worse time because if there were any jobs, they were taken up by 2002 graduates, and there's very few jobs in the sector. It's in the dozens, right? So it's 2003. It's coming up in graduation. We have basically our senior prom for Harvard. I forgot what they're called, but basically the final big party. But I don't have a job, so I'm coming out of Harvard Business School. I think I'm on top of the world, right? Got my MBA, have an amazing experience, Princeton undergrad, yada, yada. But we finished classes and we're graduating in a week and I literally don't have a job. Have had over 100 interviews, hedge funds, private equity companies, even delved into biotech interviews, like whatever I could do to both get practice and see what was out there.
Yeah, I feel you. I was so I graduated in 2010, so I was like at the bottom. So
yes.
I probably had like 40, 50 interviews, got nothing called back. So I definitely feel you on that.
That's the exact same timing because it's like the year after the bottom, which you think is better, but in a lot of ways it's worse because if companies are hiring at the bottom, they're hiring at the bottom. But in 2010, all those jobs, whatever would have been there, was gone.
Yeah.
So then I had 2 opportunities because I was hustling big time. One opportunity was to go to Goldman Sachs in New York. This is like literally like a few days before graduation. The other was to go out to an unknown and really a non-private equity firm, which is a place called Vulcan in Seattle, Washington, which was basically just Paul Allen's family office, which at the time had really not been professionalized, had no track record in private equity. I think they'd hired one person to hire other people to start the group, but really was nowhere, no contracts, nothing. It was just total greenfield in Seattle, which is about as far from finance as possible.
Right. But for those who don't know, Paul Allen is the co-founder of Microsoft, the fourth richest person in the United States at the time. So
he was bouncing around between number 3 and number 5. And the funny thing is, back then, is really Bill Gates, Buffett, and Paul Allen, and maybe, I don't know who was number 4, but they were the top 3 every single year.
Yeah.
Unlike now, where things totally shifted, in the last, obviously, 15 years or so. But at the time, yeah, he was the 3rd richest man in the country. Which sounds in retrospect like a great opportunity, but when you're coming out of Harvard Business School, you go to like the blue chip of the blue chip, the best of the best. You don't go to an unknown place in the middle of nowhere, relatively speaking. Seattle, there's no Amazon back then. I mean, not really. Amazon was a great company, of course, but really only Microsoft was the only real tech company at the time. There was no, I don't know when Google went public, I don't remember, but Google wasn't Google then. This is like ancient history in the world of technology. So, but I remember I interviewed at Goldman, went through multiple rounds. I was about to go back for a final breakfast with the head of the group. I assumed they were going to give me an offer then. And I just remember looking around at the cubicles there. And when I was working in private equity, it was a very nice private equity firm, very well run. And we had very nice offices. But Goldman is a machine, right? Amazing company, best brand name in the world, one of the best for sure. But the cubicles came up to here. And I was like, there is no way, as a Harvard Business School MBA, I'm going to sit in this cubicle where literally you're like this and everyone can see what you're doing. It's just like the weirdest feeling. And I was just like, I'm not doing this. I don't care. I'm going to Seattle. So I booked a one-way flight to Seattle. Had been there once before in my life for the interview and just started working for Paul Allen.
Awesome. And you were there for what, around 6 years?
I was there for 6 years. We invested, our team, because no man is an island, but our team invested over $500 million and publicly returned over $3 billion of cash to Paul. I became a partner there. At the time I was the number 2 partner in the group. So it was a great run.
What were your biggest takeaways from working? I get you had a ton of capital to work with. And obviously it sounded like it was a startup, so you probably had a ton of autonomy. Is that correct?
We had a ton of autonomy to invest in really whatever we wanted. Primarily, we invested oil and gas, mainly pipelines, moving oil and gas from one place to another. So moving oil around, moving gas around, moving refined products, things like that. Also, it's called the midstream sector, is what it's called. And it was an amazing run. Also invested in financial services. I think my takeaways are that to build something from scratch, you really need to create good governance around what you're doing. You really need a good process. Even if it's a 10-person company, we had investment committee every Monday morning. We had a certain type of memorandum we'd write each time. There were certain checks and balances during the process of getting an investment through the door that was fresh to getting it approved through multiple hurdles, right? This is pretty standard for a lot of private equity firms that have been around a long time. But when you're starting one from scratch, you got to build those processes yourself.
Right.
And building those at the beginning, even if you're changing them over time, is very important because then the junior people can come in and they can plug into that system and they know there's leadership and a process that's getting them from A, which is a new investment that hasn't been looked at yet, to B, which in our case would be actually funding the investment.
Okay. So you're working there. How big was that team actually? Like when you started and then at the height?
Well, when I started, I think I was like, I don't know, maybe the 3rd hire or something like that. It didn't really matter. I mean, we were all being hired at the same time.
Yeah, right.
It was literally starting, and 10. I think we had 9 or 10 at the peak. That's it. Awesome. We might not even have hit 10. It's probably 8 or 9. So a very small team, which is typical in these type of investment firms. 10 to 20 managing, $1 or $2 billion is not is amazing, but not unusual at the same time.
And then, so you get done for the 6 years, and then what happens after that?
Right. So I can't go into deep detail because you don't want to, as you're about to hear. But all I can say is that Mr. Allen, may he rest in peace, and I got sideways in terms of our agreement, which, as a private equity investor, you get a percentage of the profits. It's very standard. And Mr. Allen basically didn't want to pay me what he'd owed me, and this is all public information, so I'm not saying anything out of turn. So I left Vulcan on I got fired, actually. And I was like, I can't get fired, I'm a partner in this fund. But that happened, he controls the keys to the door. So I was forced to sue him in litigation for 4 years to get what I felt was my rightful amount, which it was, I had to put everything I'd ever made up until that point in time and allocate it to the lawsuit to pay the legal fees. So basically, if I lost the lawsuit, I was literally 100% wiped out.
How long was this lawsuit going on for?
It was 4 years.
4 years. What were you doing during these 4 years, other than battling this lawsuit?
The first year,
were you investing yourself, or?
The first year, I was 100% focused on the lawsuit, and then lawsuits go in. You have an original trial, let's say, and then you have appeals and appeals and appeals. That's why lawsuits in the United States last so long, because you can always keep appealing, and each appeal could take however many months or years. After we won the first main trial, and then his team started appealing, I was 80-90% sure we're eventually going to win. So after the first year of focusing on it full time, I started investing my own money. Started my own family office, which was just an LLC at that time. Hard to believe that it's actually been in existence. It's called NT Capital Partners, my name, but it's been in existence for 10 years now. Actually, this is like the anniversary, dude. Like, it was January 2010, and now
Cheers
it's March.
To that.
Cheers to that. If you told me that I'd be investing, because I've never been on my own before. Like, let me focus on one point as we get to that. I'd never been truly on my own before because I had a boss named David Capobianco, who's absolutely a freaking genius investor in every sense of the word. We're just walks on water. And now he runs I don't know how much he runs, well over $1 billion now. Amazing guy. So I had someone I was lucky to work with someone that was like A++ player for 6 years. And so we did all our, spent every day together, 12 hours a day for 6 years. And so I thought I was pretty awesome. I thought I was pretty good, and I probably was. But the difference between being a number 2, or as I like to say, as a partner there, so as a number 1.5 player, and then being a number 1 where it's like the buck literally stops here, is such a quantum difference. And I remember he always used to tell me that. He's like, one day you're going to have my seat, one day somewhere, and no one is going to be there to guide you or tell you what to do. It's going to be a big difference. I'm like, whatever, you're young, you're like 30, you're like, I can do it.
Yeah.
But then when you get in that seat, right, and you're making the final investment call, and you're on the board, right, and
everyone's looking at you,
or you're the CEO, or whatever,
yeah.
Whatever the analogy is, it's such a big difference. And so, I started my own investment firm, 2010, and still, I'm still living here, so something must be going right. Worked out right. So after the first year, I started investing in startups, and my thesis, this is 2010. My thesis was, the world had just ended. Trying to wipe my mouth with my back of my hand, right? Because don't want the coronavirus. So the thesis was that the only thing I knew is that I know I want to live in the United States. Pretty basic, right? I like the United States, American citizen. It's a great country. I was born here. So that's all I know. I don't know where I'm going to live. I don't know what I want to do. I know I'm a very good investor. So I want to invest, and I want to be in the United States. What do I know? I know that for the next 10 years, this is my prediction, and don't forget, this is easy to look back and say, oh, of course this is true, but in 2010, as you remember, the world was ending. Nothing looked good. Everything was going down forever. Like, it didn't matter what, it was all ending, right? The financial system was ending, the political system was ending. It was bad. I said, well, I know oil and gas, and that was, by the way, massively in the dumps. Crushed. Oil was at 140 in 2008. I think it halved in the next year. So like, no one wanted to invest in oil and gas. But I said, look, oil and gas long-term is going to be a great place to invest. But I already have so many chips on that, I'm not going to do that, right? Because I still have my investments with Paul. Healthcare is going to be big because of demographics, but the government's a huge payer. It's too complicated. I don't want to get involved in healthcare. That was just industry I identified, like that's clearly going to be big for 10, 20 years. And the third was technology. I'd always loved technology. You know, my dad got me an Apple IIe and then an Apple IIgs computer when I was in grade school. This is way back in the day. I used to program like weird designs and just mess around with it. Totally self-taught, you know, it was very basic. I think it was called basic, right? Programming. Always liked technology, but never had a chance to do that professionally. My job just didn't take me there. But I said, well, technology, I think, is something that the United States is going to be dominant for a very long time for very specific reasons. Again, it looks very obvious now, but it wasn't back then. We have the institutions, as in the educational institutions, best, you know, college and graduate educational institutions in the world. We have the incumbents. Basically, we have, you know, the big technology companies are, a lot of them, most of them are based here, still true today, obviously a lot in China as well. We have the entrepreneurial spirit here. No one can beat our culture. Again, that's shifting around the world too, which I think is a good thing, but no one can beat our culture. And we have the capital markets. Yeah, they're down now. We have greatest economy, or one of the greatest in the history of the world, a lot of private wealth. People will fund and take risk and lose their money on startups.
Right.
So I said, well, if I look at those four things, at least for the next 10 years, I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to relearn, you know, what I know about technology, engineer by training at Princeton, right? And I'm going to focus on tech. And then, you know, one of my buddies started a tech company, and he sort of convinced me to invest. It's my very first investment, a company called Quickie. And he's a pretty charismatic guy, and he convinced me to, it took him about a year, to come out of retirement and go help him run the company, be his business partner, and be COO and board member of this little company in New York called Quickie.
So how much did you invest out of the gate?
I think, this is a long time ago, I think I invested like maybe $250,000, somewhere like that, maybe a little less, which at the time was a huge number for me. I think I might have invested 50 the first round and 200 the next, something like that.
Yeah.
You know? But then I also, more importantly, raised another $1 million and change. So my vehicle had like $1.5 million in this little startup, which anyone knows that losing your own money is bad, but losing someone else's money is like 10 times as bad.
Yeah, way worse.
So you think it's like, oh, it's, you know, is that a lot of little for Navin? It doesn't really matter. The point is that when you're investing in startups, even today, and I know guys, I'm not going to name the company, but I know guys that have sold their companies for over $1 billion, and they will only invest $50,000 in the first round of a startup, which is smart because they invest $50,000 times 100 startups, and the 10 that make it, they invest another 50 or 100 or 500. They scale in. Right? That's a very smart strategy because startups 90%, 95% fail, despite having the best business plan, the best PowerPoint, the best people, the best, it doesn't matter.
What do you attribute that to?
So I saw a stat a couple years ago, which has always stuck with me, which is that, I think it came from Fortune or Forbes, I'm not sure. It basically says that over 40% of startup CEOs say their startups failed. So the CEO is actually admitting this. They say their startup failed because it turns out there was no product market fit. There was no product market fit for the product. Their product and the market didn't fit.
So they didn't even test their hypothesis.
They did not test their hypothesis. They did not use the Innovation Bootcamp way, which you have.
Yeah. So why don't we dive into that? What is the innovation process, the 4-step formula, as you would call it, to avoid being one of these 90% startups that fail, or a 40% CEO that thinks they know everything and they get proven wrong?
Exactly. A female executive friend of mine messaged me on Instagram to one of my messages and say, you know, you say 40% of startups fail. I think it's all because of the male ego, which I thought it was like, you know what? It's very hard to like,
can't really argue with that.
But Innovation Bootcamp, just a step back, you know, about 3 years ago, I decided to really lean into my public speaking and start teaching what I know, right? Because Quickie has been sold for 5 years. Skykick has hundreds of employees now. My main company that I'm on the board of, lead investor, we've raised almost $100 million. So like everything is in a very, aside from the coronavirus, everything is in a very, very nice place. So I started really scaling into my speaking and also training executives at places like Microsoft, at Google, Deutsche Bank, Bank of Santander, Citi, I mean, all these different, sort of Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies. But then I realized that all those folks are great, but it's so much more rewarding for me to work with people like you, Daryl, who literally take the learnings and implement them that day. And I'm so proud of what you've accomplished, or what I can, the little that I've contributed to your accomplishments, we can all be proud of. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. The biggest thing that I took away, it was like, I took away a lot, innovation process a lot, but it was really like this one comment you made during like one of our like July or August webinars. It was so simple, so stupid. It was just basically like, we were talking about calculating ROI, what's a huge ROI, and then I was talking about how employees were unhappy, and he's like, well, did you ever calculate the ROI of like, what if somebody left, and what would that? So I ran the math on that, and it was like, if I were to lose my top employee, it would have been like a $30,000 or $40,000 hit just on like trying to figure out what they have, the stuff that they did training something else. And then I just figured out like, okay, how can I get better off of that? So it was like, well, let's start taking out everybody to lunch like once a week. Let's start having one-on-one sit-downs, figuring out what they actually need, and start working for them versus them working for us. And I did the math. I'm like, what does that cost me? Like lunch, it was like $100. So it's like the ROI, we're spending like $100 a month versus saving $30,000 was like insane.
Right.
And ever since that, like, it's just been like every month's been progressively better and better. My employees are happier and happier, and like now I'm letting them work from home and everything. So like basically I'm trying to work for them now versus that. So
amazing.
It was that. And if I were to lose my one employee, like she was like I don't even think the company would be here anymore, because she was doing a ton, and I was at a place where I was like just kind of over it.
I remember.
And if I were to lose her, I would have been like, I gave it a good go, we'll find something else, or I might have just been like doing one or two deals here, but not like on that exponential trend, which I am right now.
Amazing.
So I thank you for that.
Dude, I mean, it's my pleasure. It's great to help people and hear those stories, and you're a great, all the guys in our group are a great story. Another great story was Josh, right?
Yeah.
And how he was, I'm not going to say the number, but he was down to his last dollars for his business when he started the coaching, and 60 days later, he's tripled his liquidity in 60 days. His sales pipeline is the biggest it's ever been, and his processes are obviously way better. That's what created that value. It's a real estate remodeling business in St. Louis. But the crazy thing is that one time he sent me and Derek, my co-coach, a FaceTime, or a voicemail, but basically a video voicemail, and it said, all these economic progress, all these financial accomplishments are amazing, but the value of that on my wife and daughter is actually more impactful to me than what I just told you about him tripling his liquidity. I mean, I was just blown away by that. It makes sense because, of course, ultimately, we're not here to make money just to like have a bunch of ones and zeros. We can't even count our money now, right? It's ones and zeros in the bank. It's fictional IOUs, right? The bank owes you $1 million or $10 million. That's your net worth. We can't even count it. Yet, a lot of people believe that the more of those fictional ones and zeros you have should make you more happy. But ultimately, he is someone who obviously understood that the money is to create a business so he can make his employees happy, provide them a standard of living, and have the freedom and flexibility to go in Mexico, which he did over this winter with his wife and daughter, and have a great time, spend time with them. Not be like spending 80 hours a week on his business.
Right.
And that's really creating those systems and strategies, which we teach you at Innovation Bootcamp, is really, that's what makes me happy to be able to contribute that way. So, you asked directly a question about the innovation process, but before I get to the innovation process, I want to talk about the innovation mindset, right? Because you need to have a flexible mindset in order to implement a process, because the innovation process is simple but not easy, right? It's simple to talk about, and I can teach you it in a few hours or even an hour. But to actually implement it, you got to have the guts to actually say, hey, I'm not perfect. I don't know what I'm doing in every area. Let me test and learn with the innovation process and see if I can improve things very quickly and very cheaply, and be willing to change. Because as we know, most people are not willing to change.
And they're not willing to fail.
And they're not willing to fail.
You got to take a bunch of L's in this process to get that one W.
Yes. And that W is, and we always say that knowing what not to do is probably more important than knowing what to do. Because ultimately, by process of elimination, you're going to get that eventual W. Now, if that took a long time and was very expensive, that'd be a bad thing. But the innovation process lets you do it very rapidly and quickly. For you, you're doing multiple tests per week at this point. So the innovation mindsets basically means, you have your morning routines. So you're always getting in the right frame of being. Because ultimately, if you can't continue to improve yourself, you can't continue to lead your employees, and you can't continue to improve your business. It all starts at the top. Whether you're the head of a department, or whether you're a business of one, or whether you're a Fortune 500 CEO, it all starts at the top. So you got to improve yourself. So the morning routines are critical. And one of those morning routines that I believe in is meditation. I love mindfulness. That's super important too. But meditation, just 3 minutes, 5 minutes a day in the morning, just remembering that you are just not this bag of flesh that's running around with, blood and guts in it around the earth, right? Mm-hmm. You're not just your body. You're also not just your mind, right? Because your mind has these patterns, these loops, right? A lot of people tend to feel the same way all the time because they are in this chemical pattern of feeling that way. But who is the person thinking about the feelings, right? We're not just our thoughts. We're not just our feelings like animals. We have that self-awareness, right? The self-awareness, looking at ourselves in the mirror. That's why we have the beautiful experience of being human beings. So we're not just our body and we're not just our mind. We're a consciousness apart from that. And tapping into that and just being self-aware, for lack of a better, we're not trying to get spiritual at all, but we all know that we're self-aware. Mm-hmm. So having that self-awareness, being, what am I really doing? Why am I really doing this? Is that really the truth? Am I really feeling this way? Just taking a few minutes every day to do that is so critical to improving yourself. Because you can't improve yourself if you're not truthfully looking at yourself. And that's what the meditation is meant to do.
So for someone who doesn't meditate or is not super familiar with, what are some like tools, tactics, like the bolts that they need to know to know about it and then also to implement it in their daily routine?
Number one, there is no wrong way to meditate. It's kind of like working out, except in working out, once in a while, 1 in 1,000 chance. You could injure yourself. You could be your first time at the gym and drop a 100-pound weight on your foot. That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
But for the most part, if you're out of shape, there aren't that many bad ways to work out, as long as you don't injure yourself. Meditation is the same way. A lot of people put all this pressure on themselves to meditate. Like, I need to have no thoughts. I need to be in Zen. I need to achieve nirvana. I need to be the Buddha. But if you think about that, that's like someone who has never run before saying, okay, I'm going to go out and run a 4-hour marathon today, right? Mm-hmm. That's the equivalent. No, go run a half mile. Go take a walk. Go take a gentle hike up a hill and take some Instagram videos. That is, if you've never run before, that is a perfect first step.
I totally botched that because I've never ran long. I haven't ran a 5K before, and my first race was a 50K, and
oh my God.
I was just wrecked. My knee still hurts 2 years later. Yeah, so I'm completely blew that out of the water. Don't do that.
Don't do that. But most people will not even do that.
I haven't even run ever since, so it totally ruined it for me.
There you go.
I'm never going to run again. So
50K, that's unbelievable. So yeah, most people think meditation, they need to be perfect at it. But again, that's like your first day running ever to go run a marathon. No, you would never expect to run a marathon your first day. You might not even expect to run 3 to 5 miles because that can be painful and you might not be able to accomplish it. Same with meditation. Don't expect to be the Buddha the first day. Just take that first step. Sit quietly with your eyes closed and think about your day and think about, pumpkins, or think about outside, or think about your favorite TV show. I don't care. But over time, in those 3 minutes, your mind will get more and more and more quiet. Just like if you're running, you could run a little bit faster and a little bit longer with a little less pain each time. Every run doesn't need to be the perfect run. Every meditation doesn't need to be like you're freaking Krishna. Right?
Yeah.
Just sit there for 3 to 5 minutes. And as you know, and the reason why I can say that is because 2 years ago, I didn't meditate 1 minute. Right? I didn't meditate. I said I couldn't meditate. It's not for me. But then I had a coach that said, you will meditate and you will do it today. And so I said, okay, and he was a big guy with a lot of tattoos. So I said, I will do it today. And I just started doing it. And then I went to a Joe Dispenza workshop. Joe Dispenza is an amazing meditation teacher. I mean, the guy's very famous. And so I ended up for 3 days, and I said, well, this is going to be really painful. And it was a little painful the first couple hours, but really, he does a great job. And after 3 days, I did multiple 1-hour meditations, even though I couldn't meditate 3 minutes when I walked in the room. And now, for example, yesterday, the last few days since I've been, hunkered down a little bit here, I've been doing 1.5 hours of meditation a day, 30 to 45 minutes at a time. I can get in the zone just like that. As you know, I'm big on the ice baths. Mm-hmm. I can get in the ice bath and it takes some preparation, but get in there and I just go into a different place. Like last week, I was filming some stuff for Innovation Bootcamp online, and we did an ice bath, but on film. So when you're doing it on film, you can't make funny faces and stuff. You just got to get in there and be in the zone. So I get in the ice bath, which you can see right over there. It's totally frozen, 100% solid block of ice, and we bashed it down to open it up a few days ago. And I get in, and I was like, all right, I don't want to be in for 2 minutes because then you could take a couple hours to recover, and I had to keep filming. So I'm like, I'm just going to be here for 30 seconds and just give them enough time to film. That's plenty of time to cut into B-roll or whatever. And I just got into the zone, and I'm like, man, I'm not going to last 30 seconds. Let me just take 3 more breaths and just try to get 30 seconds for my film guy. And I got out. I'm like, oh man. I'm like, hope that was enough film. That was I think I made it 30 seconds. And him and Travis were like, no, dude, I think you got a lot longer. I'm like, nah, that was definitely not more than 30 seconds. They went and checked the film. I was in there for a full minute.
There you go.
But I was so in the zone that I'm very good at estimating time. Just as I'm not perfect, but I'm very good at saying, oh, it's been 7 minutes or it's been an hour and a half or whatever. I missed a minute by 30 seconds. I mean, that's a massive difference, but that's how deep in the zone I was.
So what do you attribute the ice bath to? Does that help you with your clearing your mind out? Also enhance meditation? What do you use that for?
So I use that to remind myself that we can accomplish a lot more than we think. And that we need to continually seek out little unharmful discomforts to train our mind to be tougher and tougher and tougher. Because it could be as simple as you got 10 more emails and you're just I just don't feel like doing this right now, and you feel very unproductive. Just that little feeling. But when you train your mind with working out like you do, or ice baths, or whatever, or meditation, then your mind is a little stronger and says, you know what? That's just a smokescreen. That's just my mind telling me I'm tired. I really need to get that email done. And I kind of like doing some of these emails. So I'm just going to do it. Just pushing through that one moment. It's like fighting those battles in that moment with yourself.
Yeah. So just adding suffering to your routine.
I wouldn't even say it's suffering, because the reason why I didn't know how much time that was, David Goggins talks a lot about suffering. So it probably will feel like suffering for most of you. But the reason why I wasn't suffering that moment is because I was so present because of the physical shock that time stopped, essentially.
Awesome. So if we can do a podcast first, you want to lead us through a little 3-minute meditation?
We want to do meditation, so we need a little meditation music. So if you're watching this at home, what I want you to do is I want you to sit up straight in your chair, put your feet firmly on the ground, and just, if you need some back support, put your back against the back of the chair, be supported. We got some meditation music playing. A little scratchy.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's better. I don't know what's going on with my speaker. So we're just going to do a 3-minute meditation, feet flat on the ground, in your chair, back supported, and just close your eyes. Seriously, close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths. And just let out the exhale with a big sigh. Inhale into your belly using your diaphragm. exhale from your mouth or your nose, doesn't matter. And as you continue to take deep breaths, feel your feet touching the ground. And imagine that beneath your feet is the earth, grass or sand or dirt. And just imagine that you're barefoot on the grass or on the dirt or in the sand. And breathe into that intersection between your feet and the earth. Exhale. And feel the earth supporting you in everything you do. With gravity keeping you here, with the free air that you breathe, with abundant food and water, and feel supported and a sense of gratitude for all the things you have in your life that you did not and could not create. And take 3 breaths into that feeling of gratitude on 1. 2. And 3. And as we continue to breathe into our belly, and from this place of gratitude, choose one intent for today. One word that describes your intention for today. And choose that word now. Whatever your word is, it doesn't have to be perfect, but that is your intent for the day. And this intent will stay with you and guide you for the next 24 hours. And with our last few breaths, breathe energy into your intent and just keep it in your mind. Imagine it as a cloud or a spark or an energy or a light inside your head guiding you. And take 3 deep breaths, filling your intent with energy on 1. 2. And 3. And as we remember the earth supporting us for today and every day, and with our intent, you may gently open your eyes.
Feel refreshed?
Excellent. What was your intent of the day?
Happiness.
Happiness. It's a good segue to the next section. I was very focused on giving everyone there a good experience. That my intent of the day was intent, which actually is not a bad one, to have intention, and i.e. purpose in everything I do today, whatever that purpose happens to be. So we'll do the next section of our podcast with the intent to serve the Salt Lake business community.
And bring happiness.
And bring happiness. And during the water break, you asked me what my definition of happiness was. And that's a hard one because I think at different points in our life, happiness means different things. And I think more than just meaning different things, like, oh, happiness when you're 16 is a new car. Happiness when you're in college is getting done with finals and finishing. Happiness when you have a job is like getting that promotion. Happiness when you're an investor is making your first $1 million. Happiness when you're a startup is maybe selling the startup or going IPO, right? Those are all external factors and bigger external materialistic things. And maybe that's just me because I grew up on, Wall Street, immigrant mentality, got to make it. When I was born, my parents lived in a 2-bedroom apartment where the rent plus utilities was less than $200 a month. So for a 2-bedroom apartment being less than $200 a month, obviously not the fanciest place in the world.
Right.
So you can imagine why being able to provide for myself, my family, my friends, my companies, all that sort of stuff has been a very big driver. But as I've reached a certain level of success, I realized that happiness comes more internally. I think we all know this intuitively, but how many of us actually practice it? But happiness comes from something internal. So I think over time, happiness goes from being something that's external, and then on the pendulum, it swings more towards internal. You can still get happiness by selling your company. You should be happy when you're selling a company, but more and more of your pie chart of happiness just comes from your everyday health and wellness, mental well-being, being around positive people. For me, being able to serve, lead, and inspire folks, the privilege of helping you, Daryl, and others like you on their innovation journeys, that gives me a lot of happiness now. And I think also, I know I heard Tony Robbins say this like 10 years ago, progress equals happiness. And Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, also said this in a different way in his book. And basically it was like, golf's a great sport because you can progress in golf well into your 60s. So you're always progressing. Most sports you can't progress into your 60s, but because you feel that progress, you always feel happy, and that's addictive in a good way. So I would say 2 things. Happiness is an internally generated feeling, and the more you can base your happiness on things that are internal that you can control and provide for yourself every day, simple things like having a cup of coffee and enjoying nature here or on a hike, as well as doing the great things for your companies, but the more you can have it internally generated is great. And then progress equals happiness. So for me, I've been doing this ancient Indian yoga breathing technique. And, breath work is a big thing if you're into mindfulness because your breath is the source of life. We can only last for like a couple minutes without our breath. So learning how to use your breath, whether if you're an athlete or a singer, is huge, right? Huge. And people come and train in Park City, Utah, just to oxygenate their body, which essentially is using their breath more efficiently. So I don't want to get all woo-woo, but using your breath is a great way to improve your health. So I've been doing this breath work twice a day now. And even though I can do it anytime I want, I feel happy that I'm making this progress. So I'm like, man, that was hard to do, or that was challenging. But now instead of it doing 0 times a day or 1 time a day, I do it twice a day. And just that little tiny thing that most people think would be meaningless gives me a sense of progress and happiness. Mm-hmm. So just to say that the simplest things can make you happy.
Yeah. So if we apply that to business, obviously going back to the innovation formula, innovation is always about progress, getting better, refining, testing and learning and evolving.
Yes.
So if we can circle back to the 4-step innovation formula that you teach, what is the groundwork, and then we can dive into that more.
Sure. So let's get to that. So the innovation formula is, you know it. What is it? Step 1?
Step 1, ask a question.
Step 1, ask a question. Ask a question about your business. How can I make my employees happier? Would be a good start, right? Or will this Facebook ad that has people in it versus graphs in it perform better, one versus the other? Ask a question that, from the perspective of what would I love to know about my customers? And then ask a question that could help you learn something about your customers and move your business forward.
Moving on to step 2.
Step 2, ask a question.
And that's create an MVP.
Create a minimum viable product. So your product should be minimum and viable. For Daryl, it's been Facebook ads. He doesn't even need to create a product. He puts an ad out there to test the value proposition of a future product. So you're really not testing the product, even though we call it MVP. You're testing the value proposition of the product to your customers. Because from my perspective, this is a product. But from the customer's perspective, it's really the value proposition that the product provides that's the most important.
Right, and going back deeper on the MVP, one of the cool things that I learned from you is Dropbox's MVP, which if everyone knows file sharing, Dropbox, Google Drive, all that was fine and dandy now, but back then it was super complicated.
Yes.
Nobody really knew how to build that technology, so in order to do so, we would need a ton of engineers, a ton of time, and a ton of money. So before they made all that investment and then said, hey, do you guys want this? What they did was just create a spoof, a fake video, if you will, of just showing the concept of it would work. They put it out and they got thousands of email addresses in like the first day or first week. So they knew out of the gate that, hey, people want this. So now they have confidence in putting that money in there. So that was one of my favorite MVPs is you don't need to actually build the product. You can literally just, like every time I see one of those crazy iPhone flip videos, I'm thinking Apple's just putting out MVPs. Like, what do people think about this concept? And if they go, they might go down that rabbit hole.
Exactly. You bring up a great point. Dropbox is a great example of an MVP that cost them little time or no money, but gave them the confidence to make that investment, which is the same thing you're doing with your Facebook ads, right? You're testing a value proposition, then you know which path to go down after you do. And step 3, as you know, is probably the hardest in some ways, is test with customers. Because, as business founders and CEOs, sometimes we don't want to know if we're wrong. We talked about the male ego before. We want to know we're wrong intellectually, but we really don't want to be wrong because it sucks to be wrong. But until you test with customers, you don't actually know if your business or product or service is really wanted by the market. And it's really good to know that before you spend all this time and money building that.
And what are some examples that you can give that would be testing with customers?
Well, a great example is my company Skykick, which I've been fortunate to be on the board of for many years. The founders, before they went out and created a very complicated technology, which is a migration tool to move things from Windows Exchange server to Office 365, they went out and they did a lot of the process manually because the technology literally did not exist. So they did this very complicated, what would take a consultant 40 hours. They created a basic technology for it. But if the scenarios that were involved were not solved by their basic algorithm, they had to do that part manually, right? So they just had one person doing that manually. But they figured out over many iterations that this was a value proposition that was extremely valuable in the market. And that gave them the confidence to quit their jobs at Microsoft and join the startup.
Awesome. So that's
testing with customers.
Testing with customers, step 3, which goes into step 4.
Learn and evolve. So you got to get data from your tests. You got to learn from the data, but learning is not enough. Because you just learn something but don't apply it, that's actually very sad because you learned something, you could have applied it, but you didn't do anything with it. So, and evolve, meaning that you take that information, you analyze it, and you figure out how to move forward with your business. Maybe that means there's nothing to do because your test did not tell you any meaningful data. Okay, great, do another test. Or in your case...
Or the data could be that we have to evolve this test because this test can give us what we wanted. So now we have to revise our question. What are we asking? Maybe we're asking the wrong question.
Exactly.
So you can always evolve. It's just which way are you going?
Right. Your evolution could be, well, that was a bad question, or that question didn't work, or it could have been a fine question, but the data just didn't give you any meaningful... You couldn't make a determination from the data, which often happens, right? Or in your case, it could give you a direction. Right? It's not conclusive, but it gives you like an idea of where you're going. So then you go in that direction, do another test to explore that direction. The good example is the donut example. If you wanted to start a donut company and you started with a basic sugar donut, just a basic plain donut, and you went and tested that and people liked it, then you could evolve from there and say, all right, let me test chocolate versus vanilla. Okay, great. Well, neither of those really work. Let me test chocolate versus caramel or whatever it is, right? And you just start testing and you start finding your path into what types of products or what set of features a customer might like on a current product. It could be either. It could be that you're looking at a market and you want to validate a market. You want to say, is there a market for my product? But if you're a current business owner, which many of you are, you want to always expand into new markets. So you may have a product set, right? But you want to expand a new market. Well, you better go test that market. You better not assume that this is a good market for your product or that your product is perfect for this new market, because it never is. There's always going to be little tweaks you got to do. But go find that out first by testing with real customers before you invest that money and go into that new market or that new geography.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So yeah, that's been super helpful for me for small businesses. I hope you guys find value in that process too. Switching gears to more small business questions here.
Small business questions coming up.
Yeah. All right. So, in your experience as being an angel investor, what's the most important thing a year one business owner needs to know or needs to do to be successful and be on track for success?
So in a year one business, you don't have that many resources. You don't have that much time. You don't have that much money. You might only have one employee, which is yourself, right? You may have rented office space or free office space in your basement. You don't have a lot. So if you take all those things that encompass resources and you divide them into multiple areas, you're not going to get very far. You have to focus on doing one thing, one direction, whether that means just focusing on one product at a time or just focusing on one market. Because if you divide, if you can hire one great salesperson or two okay salespeople with that same dollar, most cases you're going to want to hire just one amazing salesperson, just kill a small market and expand from there. As opposed to dividing your resources amongst many things and many products.
All right. So
be very, very focused on what you're up to.
Okay. And then, so obviously profit's a big thing. What's the best way for a company to be profitable from the get-go?
Best way to be profitable from the get-go? Well, it kind of goes back, it obviously depends on exactly the business, right? Software companies, very hard to be profitable from the get-go unless you're really consulting, which then you're not software anymore. Just as one example, right? But number one is product market fit. Knowing your product market fit before you start the business means there's a definitive value proposition for your product, which means you can go and sell it. So if you're testing with customers, that literally means you're testing with customers. When you start your business, you have customers to start selling your product with. And that's the only way you can be profitable from the get-go, is to have customers before you even start the business.
Okay. Gotcha. Let's see, dive into what's one thing business owners can do right now today that will radically change or improve their business?
One thing that will radically improve their business. I wish we had the answer to that question. I mean, personally, I want to know where my Innovation Bootcamp mug went, but I would figure out some sort of training that's going to help you over the next 2 or 3 years. Keep on educating yourself.
Self-improvement.
Self-improvement. Personally, I like Innovation Bootcamp because I created it, but there are probably many things, whether it be Tony Robbins or Wake Up Warrior or Joe Dispenza or whoever. Always continue to train yourself. I'm not sure if there's one thing I could tell any business owner that would radically improve their business today. From an individual perspective, if you're not online, be online, like basic stuff like that. If you're not doing social media, do social media. If you're not advertising online, please do so. Whatever that is, like that's different for every single business. But improving yourself is one thing that will radically improve your business exponentially over time. Mm-hmm. And that's what, as you know, that's what Innovation Bootcamp's all about. So I believe in that.
Awesome. So I believe last year, your company right now, Skykick, you guys hired over 100 employees? Is that?
We've hired over 100 employees over the last year, plus or minus, yeah.
Okay. So what advice would you give startups or small business owners when they're hiring?
I think the number one thing is hiring to a set of values. Because here's the thing. No one person is going to make or break your business. Actually, one person can't make your business, but they can break your business. Kind of the whole concept of one bad apple ruins the barrel. So it's so important to preserve the culture of your company. And culture incorporates a lot of things, right? It incorporates your system, it incorporates how people feel, it incorporates the mission of the company. There's so many things that incorporate that word culture. It's kind of a nebulous word. But when you have it, you know it. When you have a great culture, everyone's excited to get to work every day. Right? I'll give you an example. At Skykick, on a person's anniversary at Skykick, this just happened organically. They are so happy to work there that they bring donuts or treats for their colleagues. May stop with the coronavirus, but we don't know that yet. But that's an amazing culture. And we've done that in part by hiring to a set of values. So we could have an amazing engineer rock star, and we need to hire as many engineers as possible because we're a tech company. But if that person does not meet our values, then we're not going to hire them. So hiring to, I'm not going to tell you that are my values because otherwise you're going to just copy them, but whatever the values are for your business, whether, we are a team, we are outstanding, things like that, hire to those values.
Yeah, I think
Because that'll create a culture, that'll create a cultural fit, and ultimately 1 + 1 becomes a lot more than 2.
Yeah, I would agree. Just on the small hiring, I think we're up to 5, maybe 6 employees now. And yeah, it's just I think we as a small business, we spend so much time with each other that it's almost like to have good chemistry with everybody. Like maybe they're not the best, the best Excel wizard or the best salesperson, but if you get somebody who's 80% as good, but you have like 10 times more fun being with them, you're going to get way more accomplished because you're going to have fun coming to the office. You're going to be more open talking to them. You're going to ideate more. That's kind of what I've found in just my little startup venture is that talking and open communication with each other has been huge for us.
And when you're a small company and you have 5 people, the next person is 16.6% of your workforce. They're 16% of your culture. And if they have a big bad personality, they're going to end up being 80% of your culture in a negative way, right? It's a little easier when you have 300 employees like we do, that if you hire one person's not going to make or break your culture, but they can make or break their department, can't they?
Yeah.
Or their little area, and that can build over time. So you don't want that.
Get rid of the cancer.
Yes, exactly. Don't hire the cancer.
Awesome. So you have, how many companies are you involved in?
Everyone asks me this. I actually don't even know. I mean, like I've got passively, like any sort of high net worth person, I have thousands and thousands of investments.
So let's say active, like you're talking to the CEO, you're on the board, you're doing something where whatever you say, you have an impact on the company.
1, 2, 3. I mean, I'm only formally on the board of Skykick, and I'm also on the advisory board of CSIS, the #1 security think tank in DC. I'm an advisor to maybe 3 or 4 more companies formally.
Okay, so you're pretty active in a lot of things going on.
Less is more. I used to be on the board. I think I've been on like 9 boards or something in my career.
Right.
But now I'm only taking a board seat if I'm highly invested and highly valuable to the business, because it's a huge obligation,
right,
and a huge time sink and a lot of credibility. So you want to make sure that you pick those. It's funny because people when they're young think, oh, I want to be on the board. No, you don't want to be on the board. The board only provides legal obligation to your actions. You have fiduciary responsibility. You can get conflicted. So you only want to be on the board if you're 100% in on an investment.
Gotcha. So as being on the board, you see something going wrong with the company, or you see maybe a CEO is not performing well, or you just see something wrong and you need to give feedback. What's the best way that you provide advice without overstepping or having people lose face?
Got it. Well, fortunately that hasn't been the case in Skykick at all, but in general, what I've seen in terms of providing feedback, whether it be to a CEO or a colleague or an employee or whoever, is you always want to start with positive feedback, because there's always something good about the situation. They're working with you for a reason, right? So provide positive feedback about, and sometimes I don't do this as well, so I'm as guilty as anyone, but you want to provide positive feedback on what they're doing right. And then they're more open to taking constructive feedback on what they may be doing wrong or less right. Right? Because you don't want people to get defensive. They get defensive. The point of the feedback, a lot of people think feedback is to get it off their chest. No, the point of the feedback is to make the other person better. Right? So if you can sugarcoat the feedback a little bit, and some people are like, oh, I'm too honest, I'm too straightforward. No, that's just your ego talking. Like, there's no reason to, you can be straightforward, but you can also give them positive feedback at the beginning as well.
Right.
As long as it's honest, positive feedback, right? So, and this is a standard thing that a lot of so-called business gurus teach as well, which is that give the positive feedback first.
Gotcha. All right, let's see here. As an angel investor, whether it be active or passive, let's just say passive because those are more frequently for you.
Yes.
How do you select companies or people to invest in?
Number 1 is management hunger and track record. So how hungry is the management team to win? Because even the most experienced founders don't realize how hard a road they're about to go on, how many bumps there are going to be, how many soul-searching times there are going to be. So management hunger is the only thing that can take you through those bumps in the road.
Oh, I could agree with that.
Number 2 for management is their track record. What about their background gives you confidence that they'll actually be able to do it? Because ideas are like maybe 1% of the equation, right? Everybody's got a great idea, but actually turning that into a business and operating that business is like 100 times harder, if not more. So you need that management hunger and the track record to show, hey, they could be really hungry, but they may have no idea what they're doing. And that's not good either. So what about their experience or background has shown that they can actually do it? That's by far number one, especially with early stage startups. The earlier a company is in its life cycle, the more important the people are, which makes perfect sense, right? Number two, again, this is really more for early stage, but a lot of you are probably in this stage as well, earliest stage, the first few years of your life. If you're looking for an investor, they'll probably think similarly, if they're smart, is what are the dynamics of the market, right? Is it a big market? Is it a small market? Is it small and growing? Is it fast and growing? Are areas opening up for small companies amongst big companies, or are there too many big companies coming in? What's happening? I'll give you an example, the cloud. You would think that there's so many massive companies in the cloud that it would not maybe be a great place to be, even though it's a great trend. But the reality is, and I personally don't think that, of course, that's why I'm highly invested in the cloud, is because these big companies are focused on a few things because they have to focus to compete. Microsoft's got to focus on what Amazon and Google is doing, right? They can't be worrying about small billion-dollar markets. So as the cloud expands, there's all these niche markets that are available for thousands of cloud startups to come in and fight for those smaller niche, multi-billion-dollar markets, which are way too small for Microsoft. For a $1 trillion company, they can't be worrying about a $1 billion market. That's like magnitudes too small, right? They're focused on things that could be $100 billion of revenue or more over some period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example of you think all these giants are there, but there still are a lot of fractures and very big small markets you can work on.
Sure. So I think a lot of business owners will resonate with your quickie story. So if you could maybe give a 60-second synopsis of
60 seconds, okay.
of what was going on at your first startup, Quickie.
So basically what would happen is we had a lot of products in the market. Actually, not a lot, two. They'd won a bunch of awards. Basically, we had created an algorithm that was, you could call it visual search, you could call it a lot of things, but basically it was Instagram for video before Instagram had video. So we took all the pictures and videos on your iPhone and turned it into a little movie that you could post on Facebook, YouTube, wherever, automatically. So it looked through your whole iPhone and used AI to create videos from your iPhone camera roll, way ahead of its time. But the problem was no one wanted to pay for that. So we had a fork in the road where we're running out of money and we have these products in the market and we can't afford to keep them up anymore. Or keep them going anymore. So we had to do something crazy, which is we had to fire half our team or lay them off because they were great people, but we couldn't afford them anymore. We moved the company from Silicon Valley to New York City to be closer to our customers, and then took all our remaining money and resources and stretched it to create an iPhone app like the one I just described that turned all the pictures and videos in your camera roll into a series of videos that you could post each video individually.
The iPhone memories.
Yeah, I would never accuse Apple of copying Quickie, but it's ridiculous. That was basically identical to what we had, a year before, at least a year before they came out with that. But who knows, right? So, so basically running out of money, and we've got a few months of cash left in the bank. But then when we released our product, and thanks to Apple, we were named Apple Editor's Choice. So basically for a very brief moment in time, we were the #1 app on the App Store, because when you open your phone, back in those days, Editor's Choice was Quickie. So that Quickie logo was on tens of millions of
iPhones around the world.
And so that gave us a lot of free marketing. And fast forward the story, we were able to get hundreds of thousands of downloads, which would be millions today because the scale is 10x what it was back then. We got all these 5-star ratings, and then the problem was that we only had a few weeks cash left in the bank, and ultimately we literally ran out of money. Our cash balance hit zero. So with all that work and hard work and sacrifice, we still ran out of money. But the good news is on that very same day we ran out of money, Yahoo acquired Quickie for $50 million. So it was a huge home run for all the investors and employees, and the team got acquired by Yahoo. as the board member investor, I got to go off into the sunset. So it was like absolutely the best freaking deal that no one's really ever heard of except you guys. So,
So take us back during that time. I mean, it sounds like maybe not to that like extent, but a lot of first, second, third year small business owners, we're struggling to make payroll. Money's always tight. Sometimes have to lay off employees. Sales aren't coming in. Just take us back to that time when things are not going right. You're literally money's running out. You got 6 months left. You got to fire half your team. Like, what's going through your head at that point in time?
So the advice I would give folks is make bold decisions early. It's easy to make bold decisions when your back's against the wall and you can justify it. Like if you ran out of money and you got to fire people, it's a lot easier. It's not easy, but it's easier because you can tell the employees, look, we don't have any money to pay you, right? It's a lot harder to say, it seems like we're doing well, but as the CEO or founder, you're not doing well, and you've got 12 months of cash stuff at the bank, and you can keep people on for another 6 months, but you really shouldn't because it's off strategy. You want to go a different direction. So you got to make that bold decision early, because in the future, you won't, even if you make the bold decision, you won't have any time or money left to make that decision. So making bold decisions early, that's why they're bold decisions. They're not bold if your backup is up against the wall and you have nowhere else to go and there's a one-way path this way and you got to go this way. It's not that bold because you only have one path to go on. It may still be hard to walk down it, but when you have 3 or 4 paths, make that bold decision early.
Awesome. And we touched on happiness. So what was your state of mind, would you say, during those final 6 to 12 months?
I would say it was
Quickie?
Extreme stress and extreme belief. Because we never would have been able to do what we did. And my business partner, Doug, amazing guy, visionary, product genius, great guy. And both of us had 100% belief we would pull it out, even though it made totally no sense. It was 100% irrational. We were that poster child startup that raised way too much money, had all this hype, and then was going to go down that no one ever heard of ever again, right? And that's not in any way critical to what we did. That's how most startups are. Right? We were better than most, but we didn't go down that path. We believed that we were the ones that are going to make that epic exit. And we did, because $50 million when you only have 8 or 9 full-time employees is pretty amazing, especially when you have no revenue as well. So, extreme belief. And as a small business owner, as a year one business, you got to have extreme belief. You have to have extreme belief.
That's what I say. If you're doing it for the money, you're going to give up pretty quickly. Because for me, money doesn't do it for me because I'll be short. Debt affects me big time. It stresses me out a ton. But once I get rid of debt and I start getting checks coming in, once I get past a certain point, I've noticed that when the wire hits my bank account, the pulse just stays the same. It doesn't do it for me. So for me, fulfillment for me is just the progression, the getting better, and executing on an idea. I think for me is I know this is going to happen. People don't think it is, or I know how much work it's going to take. And then once it does happen, then it's that satisfaction of see, I told you guys so, or I knew I could do it, and then and then almost immediately onto the next one. All right, let me find a new problem to solve. So it's all about that belief and that hunger and that drive, and that's what's going to take you to the next level.
You love the game just like Mamba.
Yeah, I love it for sure.
You have to.
Awesome. As we're wrapping this up, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to touch on?
Well, I just want to thank you for being here. I think what you're doing for the Salt Lake business community is amazing, because I think the more people and stories we can get out there to inspire, if you take one fact from this or one inspiration or one tip, I think it's a huge service you're doing to all your fans and your colleagues and your customers. So congratulations to you.
Awesome. I appreciate it. And we're taking this thing international.
Boom.
If the coronavirus doesn't shut me down.
Right, the coronavirus will not stop the podcast. I love it.
The podcast is going international. So, and then touching on that, you live in Sweden half the time, right?
I do live in Sweden half the time. So, I think Sweden is an amazing country. I've been going there for about 10 years. And I have sort of my own whole life there. I've got a huge network there, business, personal, etc. I got a home in the middle of town, and it's an amazing entrepreneurial city and country.
Do they have the most unicorns, billion-dollar companies?
Yeah, there's second most unicorns per capita, because I think Stockholm, just the city, is less than 1 million people. and they have like 7 or 8 unicorns. Skype Spotify is the most famous one. Skype was sort of the first one. iZettle, I think, got bought for like $2.2 billion by PayPal, like et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of great companies. There are a lot of great founders, and there are a lot of them are putting money back into the system, which is how you expand over time. Mm-hmm. It's just, everyone knows Scandinavia is always like the number one place to live in the world, so you can see why.
Awesome. Well, cool. Any final words? Where can the people find you? I know you're up to Innovation Bootcamp.
Yeah, my website's down right now, but by the time you watch this, it might be up. Innovationbootcamp.com. I have an online course that basically, instead of being $25,000 for coaching, it's only like $1,000 to take you through my whole training program. Basically, everything I've learned through my entire career, $3 billion of exits, I'm trying to put into that online course, and really just to serve people and help them be better.
And who is that for? Small business owners, small, medium, where are you?
It is for small business CEOs and founders. But people that understand that innovation is important. If you don't understand innovation is important, I can't help you. But if you have realized that the whole world is going to be a tech business, pretty much already is. You're already sales and marketing online, you're communicating online, everything's online. If you understand that technology trends are the trends that will ultimately influence your business the most, then you understand you need innovation. But you also probably understand you've never been trained on innovation. So where do you get this innovation training? You don't learn it at Harvard, I can tell you that, or I didn't back in the day. So I'm trying to put that all into the online course that anyone can take, but primarily for small business founders and CEOs, people like that are watching your podcast.
And then maybe for the 18 to 20-year-olds who aren't in college yet, someone being from Princeton and Harvard, where do you see the college landscape at today and moving forward? Do you think if they're hungry and have that drive, do they need to go to college?
So it really depends on what you want to do with your life. I think that college is, I would say, less and less valuable over time. I think for some hyper elite jobs like investment banking, consulting, if you want to be CEO of a Fortune 50 company, whatever it is, if you obviously want to be a doctor or lawyer or something like that, you need to go to college. So I think it's still good for a large swath of the population, but it's so freaking expensive to go to college now that the ROI is probably worse than it's ever been. And very famous folks like Peter Thiel, famous libertarian, is basically telling people not to go to college. I think doing more trade or vocational schools, like whether it be computer programming or something else, is a much better ROI than going to college these days. And this is someone who's benefited greatly from the American college system, but I think over time it's going to be less and less important.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think just testing it out, going to like weekend workshops, doing maybe like a 10-week online course or a 10-week boot camp, something like that. That way you can test it out. It's fast paced, so you get to learn a lot in a short period of time. Mm-hmm. And then it's another test and learn instead of blowing like 4 years at college and then getting a job and be like, oh wait, this is what I want to do.
Exactly.
You actually maybe you go work for somebody for free for 10 weeks, or maybe even get paid for it, and then you're like, oh, this is what I want to do, and now you literally saved yourself 3.5 years instead of finding that out, once you graduate with a degree.
Or have multiple 3 to 12 month jobs over time and go to college when you're 20 or 21, when you're sure that multi-$100,000 investment is going to be worth it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, awesome, Navin. This has been great. I hope you guys found a ton of value. Hit him up, Innovation Bootcamp online. What is the Instagram handle?
Dream Navin, DreamNavin. That's where to hit me up because I'm highly entertaining on my Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram stories. Watch them. I'll be flying from New York, Miami, LA, Sweden.
All over the place.
All over worldwide.
Less now, but we'll do the coronavirus fist bump.
Yeah, there we go. Boom.
Thanks for having me on the podcast.
All right, later guys. Take it easy.